Welcome to Top 10 Amazing Facts. Today, we're diving into 10 pivotal moments that changed the course of U.S. history forever. These are the turning points, the shocks, the triumphs, and the tragedies that shaped the nation we know today. So buckle up and let's count down the top 10 moments that redefined America. Number 1. The signing of the Declaration of Independence. On July 4th, 1776, delegates from the 13 colonies signed the Declaration of Independence, officially breaking away from British rule. This document became a beacon for democracy around the world and laid the foundation for the birth of the United States. Number 2. The Emancipation Proclamation. On January 1st, 1863, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, a historic executive order declaring that all enslaved people in Confederate-held territories were forever free. While it did not immediately free all enslaved Americans, it fundamentally transformed the war's purpose. This was no longer just a fight to preserve the Union. It was a fight for human freedom. The proclamation sent a clear message to the world. The United States was committed to ending slavery. The Emancipation Proclamation paved the way for the 13th Amendment, ratified in 1865, which abolished slavery entirely in the United States. While the road to true equality would be long and difficult, Lincoln's bold move was a critical step in that journey. It didn't just change the Civil War, it redefined the nation's values. It set America on a course where freedom, not slavery, would be at the heart of its identity, even if the struggle to live up to that ideal would continue for generations. Number 3. The Louisiana Purchase. In 1803, President Thomas Jefferson made one of the most important real estate deals in history, one that would forever transform the United States. At the time, the U.S. stretched only as far west as the Mississippi River. Everything beyond it, stretching all the way to the Rocky Mountains, belonged to France. For just $15 million, about 4 cents an acre, the U.S. purchased 828,000 square miles of land, instantly doubling the nation's size. This vast territory included parts or all of 15 future states, from Louisiana and Arkansas to Montana and North Dakota. This move allowed the U.S. gain control of the Mississippi River and the Port of New Orleans, both vital for trade and transportation. The Louisiana Purchase wasn't just about land, it was about vision. It showed that America was willing to think big, take risks, and expand its horizons. It laid the groundwork for the country's transformation into a continental power and shaped its identity for generations to come. Number 4. The women's suffrage movement and the 19th Amendment. For much of American history, women were excluded from one of the most fundamental rights of citizenship, the right to vote. But by the mid-19th century, women across the country were pushing back, demanding a say in the laws and leaders that governed them. The movement gained momentum at the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848, where activists like Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott issued the Declaration of Sentiments, boldly declaring that all men and women are created equal. From there, suffragists organized rallies, wrote petitions, and lobbied politicians, often facing ridicule, harassment, and even jail. World War I proved to be a turning point. As women took on critical roles in factories, farms, and offices to support the war effort, it became harder for lawmakers to justify denying them the vote. Public opinion shifted, and political pressure mounted. On August 18, 1920, the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was ratified, declaring, "The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex." While the fight for full equality and voting rights for all women, especially women of color, continued well beyond 1920, this victory marked a monumental step toward the inclusive democracy the nation still strives for today. Number 5. The stock market crash of 1929. The 20s had been a time of unprecedented economic growth in the United States. Skyscrapers rose over cities, and the stock market seemed like a golden ticket to wealth. Ordinary Americans, not just wealthy investors, were buying stocks, often on margin, meaning they borrowed most of the money to invest. It was a high-risk gamble, but the market kept climbing, and optimism felt unstoppable. Then came Tuesday, October 29, 1929, forever remembered as Black Tuesday. In just one day, more than 16 million shares were traded in a frenzy of panic selling. Stock values collapsed, wiping out billions of dollars in a matter of hours. People who had been rich on paper were suddenly bankrupt. The crash didn't just affect Wall Street, it rippled across the entire economy. Banks failed as they couldn't collect on the loans they had made for stock purchases. Ordinary Americans lost their life savings overnight. Businesses shuttered. Unemployment skyrocketed. By 1933, nearly 25% of the U.S. workforce was unemployed. Over 11,000 banks had failed, and the average household income had fallen by nearly 40%. The crash didn't just sink the American economy, it triggered a worldwide depression. International trade fell sharply, and countries across Europe and beyond faced economic devastation. This crisis eventually gave rise to Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal in 1933, a sweeping set of programs and reforms designed to stabilize the economy, provide jobs, and restore public confidence. This was when the Social Security system was born, along with banking safeguards like the FDIC. The crash was a wake-up call that forever changed how America regulated its financial system. Stock market practices, banking laws, and economic safety nets were reformed to prevent a disaster of that magnitude from happening again. Number 6. The Pearl Harbor Attack. On December 7, 1941, the Imperial Japanese Navy Air Service launched a surprise military strike against the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Their mission: to cripple the U.S. Pacific Fleet before it could interfere with Japan's plans to expand across the Pacific and Southeast Asia. The attack came in two brutal waves over 90 minutes. The first wave targeted battleships and airfields, catching the Americans completely off guard. Within minutes, the USS Arizona was hit by a massive bomb that detonated its ammunition magazine, causing a fiery explosion and killing over 1,100 crew members instantly. The USS Oklahoma capsized after being struck by multiple torpedoes, trapping hundreds inside. The second wave destroyed more ships and planes, leaving Pearl Harbor in chaos. By the time the attack was over, 2,403 Americans were dead, 1,178 were wounded, 21 ships were damaged or sunk, and nearly 200 aircraft were destroyed. The attack was devastating, but it wasn't a complete strategic success for Japan. The very next day, December 8, 1941, President Franklin D. Roosevelt addressed Congress in one of the most famous speeches in U.S. history, calling December 7th a date which will live in infamy. Congress responded with a near-unanimous declaration of war on Japan, marking America's official entry into World War II. From that moment on, the United States transitioned from a largely isolationist stance to becoming a global military power. Factories switched to war production, millions enlisted in the armed forces, and the nation mobilized on an unprecedented scale. Pearl Harbor was a turning point, not just for the United States, but for the world. It set the stage for the Allied victory and redefined America's role as a global leader in the 20th century. Number 7. The Civil Rights Act. By the early 1960s, the United States was a nation divided, not just by political disagreements, but by deep, entrenched racial segregation. African Americans in many states were barred from voting, forced into separate schools, denied service in restaurants, and even made to use different water fountains from white citizens. The civil rights movement had been gaining momentum for years, fueled by landmark events like Rosa Parks' refusal to give up her bus seat in Montgomery in 1955 and the courageous stand of the Little Rock Nine in 1957. By the 1960s, peaceful protests, sit-ins, and massive marches were putting pressure on lawmakers to act. The turning point came after the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom on August 28, 1963, where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his iconic "I Have a Dream" speech. The march drew over 250,000 people, one of the largest gatherings for human rights in American history. Just months later, President John F. Kennedy proposed sweeping civil rights legislation. But after his assassination in November 1963, it fell to President Lyndon B. Johnson to push it through. Johnson, a skilled politician from Texas, surprised many by becoming a fierce advocate for civil rights. He knew the bill would face strong opposition, especially from Southern lawmakers, but he also understood the moral urgency. After intense debates and one of the longest filibusters in Senate history lasting 75 days, the Civil Rights Act passed. On July 2, 1964, Johnson signed it into law in a nationally televised ceremony, using more than 75 ceremonial pens so they could be given as keepsakes to civil rights leaders and allies. The law was groundbreaking. It outlawed racial segregation in public places such as restaurants, theaters, and hotels, banned employment discrimination based on race, religion, sex, or national origin, and strengthened voting rights protections. The Civil Rights Act didn't magically erase prejudice or inequality, but it dismantled the legal framework of segregation in the U.S. It set the stage for further reforms, including the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and became a cornerstone in the ongoing fight for equality. It proved that peaceful protest, combined with political will, could bring about profound social change, and it remains one of the most significant pieces of legislation in American history. Fun fact: Martin Luther King Jr. was present at the signing and was given one of the 75 pens used by Johnson to sign the bill. Number 8. The Moon Landing. On the night of July 20th, 1969, more than 600 million people, the largest television audience in history at the time, watched as American astronaut Neil Armstrong stepped off the ladder of the Apollo 11 lunar module, placing his left foot onto the dusty surface of the moon. His words would become immortal. "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Armstrong's first steps on the moon lasted only a few moments, but they symbolized human achievement at its finest. Aldrin joined him shortly after, describing the lunar surface as a magnificent desolation. Together, they spent about 21 hours on the moon, collecting rock samples, taking photographs, and planting the American flag. The moon landing wasn't just a U.S. victory in the space race. It was a unifying moment for humanity. It demonstrated the potential of science, engineering, and international collaboration. Fun fact: Buzz Aldrin took communion on the moon shortly after landing, making it the first religious sacrament celebrated on another celestial body. Number 9. The September 11th attacks. On September 11th, 2001, terrorists hijacked 4 planes, crashing them into the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and a field in Pennsylvania. Nearly 3,000 people were killed, including office workers, first responders, and passengers from more than 90 countries. It was the deadliest terrorist attack in human history. The impact on America was immediate and profound. The sense of safety Americans had long taken for granted vanished overnight. Airports became heavily fortified with strict new security measures. The Department of Homeland Security was created, and the Patriot Act was passed, vastly expanding government surveillance powers. The ripple effects still influence U.S. foreign and domestic policy today. The September 11th attacks didn't just change America's security policies, they reshaped its identity, foreign relations, and even its culture. Number 10. The election of Barack Obama. In November 2008, the United States witnessed a historic moment that many thought they would never see in their lifetime. Barack Hussein Obama was elected as the 44th President of the United States, becoming the first African American to hold the nation's highest office. His election represented a massive milestone in America's racial and political history. It was a powerful moment of hope, not just for the U.S., but for people around the world. Of course, his presidency would face challenges, but his election itself was symbolic. It proved that, while America still struggled with issues of race and inequality, it could also break through centuries-old barriers. Barack Obama's victory didn't just make history, it reshaped the American political landscape, inspiring a new generation to believe in the possibility of change. Which moment do you think had the biggest impact? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for more amazing facts from history and beyond. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.